Hello, I'm Dr. Gloria Horsley.
And I'm her daughter, Dr. Heidi Horsley.
Heidi and I want to welcome you to Open to Hope Conversations, the podcast.
We believe that the greatest gift you can give yourself after a loss is hope, using this moment to connect with others who have not only survived but thrived.
So let's get started. Welcome to the Open to Hope Show. I'm your host, Dr. Gloria Horsley, with my daughter and co-host,
Dr. Heidi Horsley.
Well, Heidi, before we started the show, we've got a great guest today, but I wanted to say that our book, Open to Love, The Secrets of Senior Dating, written by my fiance, Dr. Frank Powers, and me, is now available on Amazon. Our book's filled with tips and tools for those of you like me who are looking for companionship as an antidote towards loneliness. Loneliness is the #1 mental health issue for seniors today. I want to tell you that all proceeds for the book go to the Open to Hope Foundation with the mission of helping people find hope after loss. So go get it on Amazon today. Well, Heidi, we got a great topic today because we haven't covered a lot about grandparents. And we have got a fantastic grandparent on today who is going to talk about life after coping with the death of a grandchild. So Heidi, would you like to introduce our guest?
Yes, Mom. And I just like to say I love this topic. I mean, it's heartbreaking, but it's so important. And like you said, we haven't done enough on it. And we've done nearly 800 podcasts and 100 radio shows and still have had very little about this. And I don't know if it's because grandparents aren't as vocal as Bradley, but Bradley's out there doing so much for so many and building awareness for this. But it is near and dear to my heart, Mom, because I remember so well how Grandpa, your father, reacted when Scott died. And he was so incredibly devastated because he was, at that time, I think in his 80s, and here his grandson dies before him. And I remember you saying to him, Dad, you need to stay on this earth for me.
Right.
Because I need you. And he did. You know, you need to stay here. So anyway, we are, as I said, going to be talking about coping with the death of a grandchild. And we're going to be talking with Bradley Vinson, who I know well through the Compassionate Friends. Bradley is doing so much for the world. He is a grief coach, a keynote speaker, and a fire and police chaplain and minister. He unfortunately experienced the tragic loss of his 4-year-old granddaughter, Alana. And he is the author of several books and the creator of the Grieve Method. Welcome to our podcast, Bradley.
Thank you for having me. I'm really excited to spend time with you guys today. Thank you for that.
Well, I was reading a little bit about you, and I guess you were in theological school when your granddaughter died?
Yes, I was in seminary, and oddly enough, I started in late 2015, around December. Nobody starts college in December, right?
Right.
And I look back on that now and I see that it was a reason for that. Had I not started then, because my granddaughter passed away the following May. And had I not started when I started, I probably never would have went, especially in the
Wow.
state that I was in after she passed away.
Right. So it took you a little different trajectory from your education, right?
It did, because I was pretty much in seminary at the time to focus on couples ministry and men's ministry. That's what I had been doing for years with my wife and then by myself in men's ministry. And I just wanted to get deeper in that and kind of spread my wings in those areas. And then when my granddaughter passed away, all that changed. All of it changed.
Well, and I'm thinking, you know, when we have the death of a family member, I know with my brother, I got into an existential crisis. You know, it's like, why are we here? What is our purpose? What is our meaning? How could this happen? And the idea of you being in the ministry and in school was kind of like a wonderful place to be.
Yeah, and it was odd because for some reason my heart was pulled into, because we were studying, we call it, you touch all 66, right? So you actually go through all 66 books of the Bible, but I was really tied into Job for some reason. And I had done a deep dive in Job. I had memorized chapters of content that I could just say verbatim out of Job. And then, unbeknownst to me, I needed that so much after my granddaughter passed away. because I was just intimate with Job and all his losses and all the things that he was dealing with. And then it was my turn, you know. And
Yeah.
so that bolstered me in a way as I tried to just semi even autopilot get my way through seminary because I was kind of why at all, you know what I mean? Then it was
Mhm.
kind of okay, I'm here for a reason. Let's get grounded. Let's get this circle of support around me. Let's lean in. And so it was just kind of just weird time for me. And a lot of it, frankly, was on autopilot. A lot of it was in that blur of grief, you know. And but I got through it. I gritted my teeth and got through it. I was really wanted to drop out, but I didn't. And I wanted to honor her life with that. And it, as I said, it changed the trajectory of what I was doing, and I started caring for the grieving community instead of working with men's ministries and couples ministries.
You know, what's different about being a grandparent and losing a grandchild?
I think one of the biggest things is the out of order grief. I know we all have our time here on earth, right? And the nature of things, our kids, especially our grandkids, are supposed to, lack of a better way of saying it, grieve us, bury us, right?
Right.
And my mom and dad are still here. Well, my dad is going on to glory now, but they were still here then.
Wow.
And I remember so her great grandparents were still here when she
Wow.
passed away.
Wow.
Wow.
Yeah.
And I remember the day I told my mom and dad about her passing, and my dad said, I don't know if I'm going to outlive this.
Wow.
Because it might
And
kill him.
and it was devastating that my parents were at an age where they might not get past intense, deep grief,
Mhm.
Right.
right? Um, and so even dealing with that, but we're of an age where no grandparent is called grandpa, grandma, right? I'm called Paw. My wife is named BB. So, we don't have like the old names kind of thing. So we kind of,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
we go out, we get around the kids, and you have grandparents that move near their grandkids and change their lives when grandkids show up. But when tragedy happens, you realize how far you are from that inner circle of grief. And I guess we all kind of know this because we've been doing it for a long time. And it's not a derogatory thing, but the further you are from being the parent, the less likely you are to get support.
Wow.
That's
So, and
interesting,
so it
Bradley.
starts with the mom, and I have no gripes about that. But the
Right.
mom, everybody runs to the mom, right?
Yep.
And then the dad gets some support. Then siblings get some support. But then the grandparents, because even as adults, we lean up, right? Mom and
Right.
dad will, help me take care of this. But now we're in that position. We have no one to lean on. We're not going to
Right.
lean down into our kids, right? And so
And,
you're kind of in that weird space.
and Bradley, I'm thinking not only do you not have anyone to lean on, and not only is it kind of an unacknowledged loss, but you are worried about your children that are grieving.
Right.
So you're
And
trying to support people while you're in profound grief.
Right. And it's because it's their loss. But then I think I even talked about this one time at a seminar, and it just fell in my spirit while I was speaking. Grandkids are children's gifts to us
Ah, that's
as
I like
grandparents,
that.
right? And
right.
so now that gift is gone. So now
Yeah.
that dynamic is like the gift I gave my parents is now gone, right?
Hmm.
And now you're dealing with that and all these things. And And as I said, you're further away from that central space of care. And it's just weird because you're like in this, and you're not jealous of your kids, right? You want them to be served and be cared for, but it's like we lost too, and
Right.
it's like,
Right.
what do we do now? How do we make this happen? And so you grieve a lot of things. And in our situation, it's even a little bit more compounded because we're actually raising my granddaughter's brothers now, and they've been with us since the age of two
So
and
you're
six.
you're you're raising Alana's brothers.
Yes,
And I know people are thinking this, so I need to ask it. How did Alana die?
it was an accident in her school.
And then the boys moved in with you after
Yes.
that, or
Hmm.
So you got to see firsthand the impact on siblings as well
Right.
and be there for them.
right? And then them being boys, right? Or little men or
Mhm.
whatever, right? And how I had to learn how to emote in a healthy way because the stiff upper lip and grieving within myself and cocooning, the typical things that men do. I now have two little boys that I have to show them and model what healthy grief is, right?
I like this, Bradley. And we wrote a book called Real Men Do Cry with Eric Hipple, who was an NFL quarterback for 10 years. And that was why he wanted to tell his story after his son died by suicide, because he wanted, like you said, to be able to tell men that it's okay to cry, to show emotion. It takes a lot of courage. You don't have to suck it up and walk it off and,
Right.
do all those things that you've been socialized to do.
And it was just weird because as I even, and I'm so happy that all this content is coming out and getting people are getting more aware of it because even in 2016, right, I'm looking for content as a grieving grandpa, as a man, as a husband, as a new caregiver for little grieving kids, and I couldn't find a lot, right? A lot of it didn't even speak to me. And so that's how I started serving. It's like, okay, so as I find little things to start piecing together the puzzle that's helping us heal, I know there's others that are on the journey behind me or maybe a few steps in front of me that don't even have this information. So let me figure out a way to share more and put more light on it. Because, I mean, and I'm just the blunt kind of speaking guy, right? Grief is seen as a feminine emotion. Right?
Mhm.
So how do we as men lean into that? And then
Yeah.
even the tiered level of man, right? You got the grandpa, and you got the uncle and all these kind of things, the father figure. So it's
And you've
been a
got your
journey.
kid, you've got your own children too,
Yes,
the parents of the child that died that you're
right.
trying to support.
And and how do you parent a grieving adult,
Yeah.
right? Um, and essentially now that the boys are in our home, it's enriching our lives, it's enriching their lives. We're all on the journey of healing. But every time I look at them, I know somebody's missing,
Yeah. Yeah.
right? Because we never saw them not together, right?
Yeah.
So even as they get older and being willing and able to circle back to their maturity level within their grief, right? Because their grief is going to change from 2 to 6 to 9, and now
Right.
from 6 to 8 to 14. Their grief keeps changing. And I'm an adult. I know the course of life, and I know we go through these things. And so I'm at a different spot in my grief than they are, right? But I got to
Right.
be willing to circle back to 14-year-old grief.
One of the things you talk about that I like about is suffering and the fact that you see suffering as optional. Talk about that.
Yeah, usually I'll tell people that in grief, pain is guaranteed, suffering is optional, and usually self-inflicted. And
Mhm.
so I separate the two, right? A lot of people think that pain equates to suffering because I feel bad. I'm suffering through this loss. I relate to suffering more so as that suffering that's tied to guilt and why didn't I? Why couldn't I? I should have did this. I should have did that. Why aren't I further along by now? I think
Mhm.
those are things that we put on ourselves and false expectations in our grief. And that's why I call it optional, because we usually do it to ourselves, or we
Mhm.
allow people to say things that will cause us to suffer, but it's how we took what they said, right? So it's still us. And so I just want people, yes, you're going to have pain, but the extra things you're adding to that suffering, you're usually doing it to yourself when you think deeper about it. And I want to help people get beyond that. Yes, the pain is going to happen, but this suffering, that's at least one burden you can relieve yourself of.
That's
I
great.
like this, Bradley, because it gives us some control. Because sometimes we feel like we're out of control. Like you said, people might say things, but it's the way we respond, and we
Right,
have power over that. We have power over our attitude. So I like a lot of what you're saying, and the shoulda, woulda, coulda's.
right,
Reworking all that is just a waste because it's happened. We need to move forward. I mean, it's
right.
you know.
And especially with children, right? It's like as soon as something happens to a child, the first thing comes to mind is where were the adults? What
Right.
decision did an adult make
Bradley, I'm wondering, given that Alana died in an accident at school, did some of your views come from your own experience of watching yourself say, okay, maybe what could I have done? And say, wait
Oh,
a
yeah.
minute, I'm torturing myself over these things?
Yes, exactly. And I actually use it in my grieve method. It's the first letter spells out the word grieve, and the G is grace for those that are not grieving,
I like
right?
that.
And it's that because I was just angry at everything. How dare you be on the freeway while I'm driving? Don't you know my granddaughter's dead? How
Mhm.
dare you be buying groceries right now? But it's like they don't even know
Yeah.
Right.
my grief story. They don't know what I'm going through. But then on top of that, it's like it's as if I have control over how the earth is spinning. Yes, that
Mhm.
happened. I hate that it happened. I wish I could have done something. And then, you kind of grab onto if I prevented that, what's to say something wasn't going to happen the next month or the next year or whatever, because we can't tell the future.
Yeah.
All we can do is go by what has already happened. But that was a heavy thing for me. Even the suffering I put on myself because I grieved the the idea of not being able to be a grandparent because
Mhm.
now with raising the boys, I got to be dad, right? So
Mhm.
I go to the store and buy clothes and pillowcases and toilet paper, right? I'm not going to buy toys every time we go, which is the typical grandparent thing, right? Uh, I can't fill them up with candy and send them somewhere because this is home,
Right. They're
right?
24/7. Also,
Right.
when you're being surrounded by the boy stuff, I'm sure when you see the girl outfits and clothes hanging in the wherever you are
Yeah.
buying these things, it brings back the idea that you don't have a granddaughter anymore.
A true transparency moment that I'm not ashamed of because I think it is part of the process. Early on, I would find myself in different stores like Target and things like that in
Mhm.
the girls' aisle,
Uh-huh.
hugging clothes and crying.
No. Yeah.
And I just couldn't, I mean, because you would go to these different stores and the things you don't see until it's like, when you buy a red car, you start
Mhm.
noticing red cars.
Yes.
And
Right.
so after my granddaughter passed away, I didn't realize that all the girls' clothes are always in the front of stores.
Uh,
Wow.
And they're usually pink and purple, which are her favorite
Mhm.
colors. So you
Mhm.
walk in the Target and the whole front of the store is pink,
Yeah.
especially during Easter, because
yeah.
all the girls' clothes, the little frilly dresses and all that are always right up front.
Right.
And it's
Mhm.
like, okay, so I can walk into any store and it's like, I don't have a granddaughter.
In that moment, I'm sure that's a choice point for you. It's
Yeah.
like, okay, I can think about everything I've lost and be in that space, or I can choose a different path now towards,
And
my healing.
yeah, and some of it was giving grief its time, but
Hmm.
also, okay, I have to buy groceries. And I
Yeah.
can't drive with tears in my eyes. I gotta
Hmm.
get home with these hamburger patties because we're gonna barbecue. So let
Mhm.
me get home, grief, that I'm gonna spend some time in the bedroom alone and lean into how I've been feeling today. And so that was a big thing for me, right? Because I still got to do life. I still got to get out there on this crazy freeway and get to downtown Dallas. And I can't do that if I'm cloudy and I'm crying. So I'd have to make a promise to grief. Grief, just let me get to work. I have an office. I go in my office and close the door, and I'll hide behind the door for a little while for 15, 20 minutes and decompress and give you your time. Grief, let me get through these meetings. Then when I get home, I got to go buy groceries. I got to go pick up dry cleaning. But when I get home, grief, I'm gonna give you your time. And I never lied to grief because I didn't want it to surprise me one day, right? So it's like I'm gonna give you your time when I get home tonight. And I had
Bradley,
to
I
do
love this
that.
because
So
you're giving grief the name and you're externalizing it. You are not your grief. Your grief is
right.
outside of you. And you're also paying attention to it and saying, hey, I'm gonna give you time, but not right now.
Reminds me of meditation, that you can control that. You can say, I will take this much time today to do this or that. I know Heidi was talking about the book we did with Eric Kippel, Real Men Do Cry. He used to go down in the basement with a candle every evening at a certain amount of time and spend time with his son Jeff and in his grief.
And you
So
got to do that because grief, and I say it in a couple of ways, grief will take its time which is it can take a while. But no, grief will take its time, as in it's going to just grab you and shake you one day. So
Right.
it's best to lean into it because grief naturally takes you towards healing. I truly believe that.
Well, what are your other things you had, your words, grief?
So G is grace for those that are not grieving. R, relinquish control, because we're not really in control anyway, right? And it's freeing to know that, we're living in a world where we can't control everything and just lean into it. I, invest in your healing. That's time, that's effort, and financially if needed. E, um, express yourself, talking about it. Grief wants to be witnessed. So you have to get it out through journaling, through talking, through singing, through art, whatever. V, visualize your healing. See sad up the road. See I don't feel good up the road, but make a plan for that, right? I want to get to that better future. And then finally, E, engage with others. That's other caring people in your circle and other grievers, because you have to build a community of people that may not have never even known your loved one, but you have to live, you have to engage with people and make people aware of your grief. Um, but one of the big things that I really share with a lot of grieving people, and it's probably the simplest thing I teach them, is the 100-0 rule. You are 100% in control of making people aware of your grief. You are 0% in control of how they respond to your grief.
Oh, I like
Love
that.
You
this.
just have to make them aware, and how they respond. You're not in control of that, right?
Right.
So yeah.
Bradley, I love your work. It's fabulous. And your ideas are so great. How do people find you?
Probably the easiest way is just through my website, which is myname.com, bradleyvinson.com. I love people just to send me emails and contact me through there. I'm on Facebook also, and have a new YouTube channel with some videos there. Just trying to give people information to serve them, and speaking, training, and doing my program.
Fabulous. Well, thank you so much for the service you've done. And thank you so much for being on the show today. You're amazing.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me.
Bradley, you are an inspiration, and I know Alana is your guiding light. Thank you so much for all you're doing for so many out there.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
And we want to thank everybody for joining us on this show today. And Heidi and I always want to remind you that if you've lost hope, please lean on ours until you find your own, and God bless.
I'm Dr. Heidi Horsley. You have been listening to Open to Hope, the podcast. You can follow Open to Hope on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. To learn more, visit us at opentohope.com and go to Apple Podcasts to subscribe.
I'm Dr. Gloria Horsley. Join us again next week for another Open to Hope conversation, where we invite you to lean on our hope until you find your own.